I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims. All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick, Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another episode of the Patriots Daily Podcast, powered by PrizePicks and GameTime. We'll talk about them a little later, but first, Taylor, let's talk about Patriots versus Bears coming up in Week 10. The Pats at 2-7, headed to Chicago this weekend to take on the 4-4 Chicago Bears. The Bears are 4-0 at home this season, 0-4 on the road, so a bit of an uphill climb for the Patriots this weekend. Obviously, there's topics to talk about around the head coaches. Maye going through some growing pains through his first year. Matt Eberflus gets another season this year. Shane Waldron as the OC, not doing great. Eberflus catching a lot of heat as well. But obviously, the number one storyline is these two quarterbacks. Number 1 overall in Caleb Williams. Number 3 overall in Drake Maye facing off. Drake Maye talked about it this week, said that him and Caleb Williams have had quite the relationship since they were in high school. They went to the Elite 11 together. They've kept in touch. They met at the combine. He called them friends, and so thought it was pretty cool that they were going to face off this weekend. And I think that's probably the number one storyline heading into this one. So since that is the storyline, Taylor did us a solid, dug into the film on the two potentially star quarterbacks, both playing pretty well this season. Caleb's had some up and downs. Maye on a good trajectory. The turnovers are an issue that we've talked about a little bit. But, Taylor, let's compare these guys a little bit further. We're going to talk about them passing in general, their ability to scramble, and their ability to throw the football downfield. So, first and foremost, take us through what you got on the passing stuff and just in general, I guess, on these two quarterbacks heading into Sunday.
Yeah, so first of all, when you look at, we know that they're similar prospects in that they're mobile. They've got great arms, really smart guys as well, great feel for the game, natural instincts that allow them to thrive. And that's why they've had success so far. Now, when it comes to their supporting cast, they're similar in that neither has a great offensive line, and a lot of that has to do to injury, like Darnell Wright. The right tackle's not going to play. Braxton Jones is injured, so they're dealing with some stuff there. It's kind of affected their run games. But when you look at the actual weaponry, Caleb Williams is in a very different place than Drake Maye, where Drake, a lot of young guys that are still coming along, still learning the game. The one veteran that you have that you rely on in Kendrick Bourne at wide receiver, at least, is someone who's still himself coming along because he came off the torn ACL, rehabbed all summer, and every week, we talked about getting to his right depth in his routes, the scramble play, maybe not moving around enough. So he's still getting his feet under him, but still got Hunter Henry, 85, reliable guy, and Ramondre Stevenson, a reliable outlet from the backfield. But then Caleb Williams has Rome Odunze, a first-round pick, Keenan Allen, another very savvy veteran who obviously has a great feel for space and is a pretty reliable pass catcher. Then DJ Moore, who, enough said, one of the most explosive players in the NFL. Then Cole Kmet, another reliable tight end who can block and be a pass catcher, kind of like Hunter Henry, maybe a little bit more dynamic. And DeAndre Swift, another solid back out of the backfield. So you're saying, okay, you'd think that Caleb Williams would be thriving right now. And Drake Maye, obviously, he's had his ups and downs. We'll get into those, but he still played pretty well. When you look at the numbers, Drake, by quite a few metrics, has been better than Caleb Williams. The biggest difference, I think, when it comes to why that's the case is the scheme. I think Dan Orlovsky did a great job breaking it down on ESPN. But Shane Waldron, and we kind of said this, I think, earlier in the week, Shane Waldron is what Patriots fans think Alex Van Pelt is, where it's you're not using anybody the way they're supposed to be used. The spacing sucks all the time. Nothing makes sense. And we all know, Alex Van Pelt hasn't been perfect. Some of the, end of half play calling has been a bit spotty. He called the last two plays against the Titans before regulation, Patriots, the last two offensive plays, the two most disappointing plays for him of the entire game. Didn't put it on the play calling, put it on execution, which it feels like has been the case anytime they have a failed 2-minute drill. It's yes, we can absolutely question the decision, but also it's not like guys are blocking it up well and it's just a great defensive play. Usually they end up failing. But for the most part, Alex Van Pelt, he's still figuring out how to use his weapons, and you can see that. And when you have so much turnover like they've had, that makes sense. But still, for the most part, there's not a whole lot of times where I'm looking at the tape thinking, what in the world is this offense? This is ridiculous. This doesn't make sense. That's not the case with the Bears. Shane Waldron's a guy who has more experience, and he's from a tree where you'd expect him to be, one of the more premier offensive coordinators that was added. Instead, you have the issues that people think of with Van Pelt, where players are in kind of awkward roles. The route spacing's not very good. There's plays where, kind of like the Patricia years, where receivers aren't even looking at the quarterback when he hits the top of his drop, and it forces some weird inconsistencies. And when you look at where Caleb Williams struggles, it's a combination of, some, bad accuracy at times, but also it just feels like he and his receivers really aren't on the same page. So that's really the overview of what's been going on around them. But before we get into the actual tape and the stats and everything, what you got?
I just, as you started to talk about Waldron and the tree he's from, and I saw you kind of saw the wheels turn a little bit, and I went to say it, but everyone says that Van Pelt is, you're saying Waldron is what people think Van Pelt is, right? And Shane Waldron, he interviewed for the Patriots OC job this offseason. I totally forgot about that. I just had to, I thought of it. I couldn't tell if I was right. And then I double checked and he did. And everyone wanted the Shanahan guy, the McVay guy. He worked under McVay, in LA. Then he went to Seattle and had a very up and down career. There was the thing with, Jackson Smith and Jigba when he was talking about how he got hired by the Bears and he was like, oh boy. And didn't really give anything.
Is this live?
Yeah,
no, I'm just kidding. And it was just even Chris Olave, I think it was.
Yeah, that's who it was. Yeah, so interesting, right? You wonder, you could have had Shane Waldron instead of you have Alex Van Pelt. I don't know who you would rather at this point. Both struggling in their own different ways. But yeah, thought it was interesting that Shane Waldron could have been here, but now he's in Chicago.
Yeah, so now we're going to break down the stats, and I'm going to have some tape on, and you'll kind of explain why these guys have been struggling and where they've had success, especially in the areas where we really know them for, like the scrambling ability and the downfield passing. But first, we're going to start off with an overview, really, where these guys have been overall as passers. Now, Drake Maye's dropped back 147 times this season, or at least since week 6. Mm-hmm. So Caleb Williams obviously has played the entire season. Drake Maye started in week 6. But for Caleb Williams, I kind of just wanted to give them that last month because in the NFL, you're typically scouting from the last 4 games. Sometimes you extend it to 6. Kind of depends on the situation, but we're going with the month. So over that span, Drake Maye has 30 more dropbacks than Caleb Williams, but he's been more accurate. He's actually been accurate on 64.8% of his passes as Drake Maye. Caleb Williams only 57.7 for Drake Maye. That's top 10 in the NFL. Obviously, not so much for Caleb Williams. Then you look at production. So passing touchdowns, big time throws. Both of those, Drake Maye has 6. Turnover-worthy plays, Drake Maye has 8. All 3 of those are top 10. Look at Caleb Williams, not quite as productive, all right? Instead of 6 passing touchdowns like Drake, he has 4. He has half as many big-time throws with 3. And then turnover-worthy plays, that's the one area where he's been decisively better. He's done a great job protecting the football, Caleb Williams. Only 1 turnover-worthy play, so really impressive there from the rookie.
That's since week 6, or that's
since week 6? Yeah, overall, I think he's got 5 or 8 overall in the season. But either way, last 4, no, it's only been 3 games for Caleb Williams. I think they had their bye in week 7, but much better job from the young guy getting over that turnover problem. And with Drake Maye, that was one thing that he has discussed. That's one thing also that Van Pelt discussed today. They've got to get better, or Drake Maye does, when it comes to those turnover-worthy plays. Now, where do those come from Drake, right? We've discussed it on the show, but just quick recap. A lot of those have come, one, from poor accuracy, where sometimes the ball will sail on him. And even last week, where he underthrows it and ends up getting picked off. The biggest thing for me, though, on these turnover-worthy plays is when he's in the pocket, trying to maybe extend the play and doesn't feel a backside rusher and ends up getting strip sacked. That's happened a couple times. Now, with this Bears defense, they will take that ball away if you hold it out there. Montez Sweat, we know, is going to be playing this weekend. So that's going to be a very big area of emphasis for Drake Maye. One, especially when that pressure's coming at him, because that's where you typically see sometimes a rush decision, or sometimes he can't quite get the ball out the way he wants to. We'll talk more about that kind of thing later. But Drake Maye been the much bigger play threat overall with his legs and with his arm. Caleb Williams struggling, but again, a lot of it has to do with the coordination of the offense in the way that he's having to read out these really funky plays. Whereas with Drake Maye, the issue has been more the lack of talent around him, and then obviously the offensive line struggles and not really having a run game that he can fall back on.
Yeah, they're definitely both, from what I remember, obviously in college, watching them a little bit, and then what we've seen in the league so far, guys who, you can trust their arm, you can trust their arm strength. They can put the ball pretty much anywhere. I do think it's interesting that, first couple weeks, I know Caleb was a little, I don't want to even say turnover happy because I don't have the stats in front of me, but the fact that he's kind of honed that in since week 6 and only had 1 turnover-worthy play since then over 3 games tells me that, with Drake Maye right now, his whole thing is, well, you got to limit the turnovers and don't put the ball in harm's way and got to protect the football. It's going to kind of be, at least in my opinion, an experience thing, and get out there and get a feel for the game. And hopefully as the season goes on, he can have that similar trajectory of Caleb Williams as protecting the football, as he understands and gets a feel more for the speed of the NFL and things of that nature. So hopefully something we can look forward to if he takes the same trajectory as Caleb.
And when it comes to the defense, it's like the Bears don't have a ton of picks, but they force a lot of fumbles. So again, that's why I'm thinking Drake Maye, ding, ding, ding. Like Will Levis, I think back in week 1, it was very similar to Drake Maye trying to flick it to JaMychal Hasty, where you start rolling to the right, don't feel the backside pressure, try to throw it, and gets knocked out. I saw the play and I was like, geez, that was like deja vu. So the fumbles are my biggest concern, but with the Patriots, they haven't forced a whole lot of turnovers. And you have the Jelani Tavai interception, obviously. Right. A lot of that had to do with the fact the ball got popped up in the air. DeMarcus Covington was asked, how do you try to create more of those turnovers with no Kyle Duggar? Obviously, that's tough. No Jabril Peppers. Like, those are the guys you really think of as your playmakers on defense. Jelani Tavai really hasn't been that guy the way he was last season. And he was saying, we have a certain thing that we study every week where, like, which guys are holding onto the ball and they're being loose with it or disrespectful, which I kind of like that. Yeah. And those are the guys they try to target and punch it out. Now, Caleb is not one of those guys. If he feels pressure, he does a great job getting 2 hands on the ball, especially when he's in the pocket. And then when he gets out, if he feels that rusher, he really kind of holds it away from them. So it's going to be tough because, again, Caleb Williams is not putting the ball in harm's way. But the Patriots, this is probably going to be a very tight game. They're going to have to find some way to generate a turnover. And also, obviously, Drake, make sure he protects the ball and everyone in general to make sure you're not giving away free possessions.
Shady McCoy, one of the most disrespectful players in NFL history, with the football in his hands, holding that thing out like a loaf of bread. All right, let's get to the scrambling, Taylor, because DeMarcus Covington, Gerard Mayo, both asked about Caleb Williams this week and talking about his ability to use his legs. Mayo noting that he really scrambles to throw and not scrambles to run. And then Drake Maye, we've seen it the last couple weeks. Obviously, he ran for 95 yards last week on 8 or 9 carries. Had over 12 yards per carry, and he's also doing so with no design run. So he's making things happen, breaking the pocket and things of that nature. So take us through a little bit how both of these guys use those legs of theirs to make things happen.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Drake Maye obviously had more of his success as a scrambler earlier on when he was starting by throwing, but against the Titans, they did such a good job getting back in coverage, matching routes and zone. He was like, you know what? You're going to rush 4. Drop 7, I'm just going to take off. And I asked him about that. He said that was really more instinctive for him. But with Drake Maye, you have to be worried about both. He also said this Bears defense plays a lot of zone. It was kind of funny because when he answered a question about the Bears, I was like, so it sounds like you're going to be doing a lot of the same things. And ironically, the Bears have actually been one of the worst defenses in the NFL when it comes to defending quarterback scrambles. I believe they've allowed the 3rd most conversions since week 5 against those types of plays. So could be a big day for Drake Maye again on the ground, but obviously you don't want him having to run to carry your entire offense. But when you look at these guys on scrambles, again, all of these stats are since week 6. We're only looking back about a month, which is, 3 games and a little bit more for Drake Maye and then 3 games for Caleb Williams. Now, when you look at their run-pass ratios, Drake Maye's about even, right? He's thrown 12 times. He's run 10 times. So you really don't know what you're going to get once he gets out of the pocket or, if he's in those situations. It could be either or. Caleb Williams, like DeMarcus Covington and Gerard Mayo said, he does a good job of keeping his eyes downfield. So his ratio is 15 passes to 8 runs. So really, you got a plaster on the back end. If he gets outside the pocket, those guys that need to make sure they have their eyes on the receivers so there's no big play opportunities. And the guys in the front need to make sure that they are able to have good gap integrity. And when you have an opportunity to take down Caleb Williams, it's kind of like Ben Roethlisberger, where you need to be very careful with how aggressive you're being in your pursuit, because otherwise those guys are very good at making people miss. Now, when it comes to accuracy on the run, Drake Maye has been significantly better, okay? With people over the past 4 weeks who've had at least 10 throws on scrambles. He and Patrick Mahomes are tied for the highest accuracy rate at 77.8%.
Pretty good company.
Caleb Williams, not been quite as good, all right? Worse than half of that. He's been 37.5% on scrambles. So you still have to respect the ability, because this dude has the flexibility, the arm strength and elasticity to be able to throw off of any platform to any part of the field. So the stats may say that, but you cannot let you be lackadaisical when you're trying to corral him. And again, when you're on the back end and having to play that plaster technique. Now, conversions, they're about the same. Drake's had 10 conversions on scrambles, both from passes and runs. Caleb Williams has had 8, just a couple fewer, but they really scramble at about the same rate. Another big difference, Drake Maye's had 3 big-time throws while scrambling. Obviously, last week had the great one to Demario Douglas when he was rolling to his right. Caleb Williams has 0 So again, he hasn't been very threatening over the past month when he has broken the pocket, but you can't sleep on him. But just something to understand and kind of keep in the back of your head. Maybe something about him and his receivers not being on the same page. But also, frankly, there's been times that I saw where Caleb Williams is trying to make one of those crossbody throws and ends up throwing behind his receiver. Neither of these guys has turned the ball over when they scramble. That's really big because obviously young quarterbacks, one of your worst nightmares is them getting out of the pocket and having some kind of bonehead decision where they throw across their body like Mac Jones against Dallas into really bad looks. So these guys both obviously extremely, extremely dangerous on the run. The Bears defense has been much more susceptible. So I feel much better about Drake Maye in that matchup, obviously, because you're talking about a strength against a weakness. Whereas the Patriots, you're talking about their strength right now against, again, not a weakness for Caleb Williams, but an area where he hasn't had much success. Right. Because the Patriots have been one of the best defenses in the NFL over the past month against scrambles. According to PFF, at least, they may have missed a couple, but they have them for 0 conversions on scrambles. I'm not sure that's true. I think they had one. I know they had one against Mason Rudolph. I know Dietrich Wise was upset with himself. He said, yeah, I kind of let the guy outside the pocket. But for the most part, they've done a really good job keeping guys contained, especially in passing situations. Because what they'll do, they'll send 5 rushers, and it's coordinated. So like we saw with Anthony Jennings, where he'll knife inside, Keon White loops around, and then you have a defensive tackle essentially spying in case there's an avenue to escape so he can spy that guy. So I'm feeling a lot better about the Patriots on these scramble plays, both on offense and defense, but you cannot sleep on the Bears on either side of the ball either, because they're a very good defensive team, and Caleb Williams is one of the most talented quarterbacks already in the NFL.
There's, I think it's going to time up. Oh, no, it's not. I wanted it to time up with one of those clips. It's the second clip in the reel, and it has to do with Gerard, not this one. It's the one of Caleb. Not this play, the next one, where he talks about scrambling to throw, not scrambling to run. His ability to decide, I'm going to run. Wait, no, I don't like that lane. And then instead of not even panicking, but changing his mindset of, I'm running, I'm breaking pocket in a different place, and not just saying I'm still going to run, because he's then able to reset, find something else, and go downfield. That's very impressive to me. That's something where I feel like when you decide to run, you don't redecide to pass, if you know what I mean, because you're just going to kind of go with it. But his ability to do that was pretty impressive. So going to be interesting to see.
Like right here, you see like with the 2 hands on the ball, look at this. Thinks about running. Nope. He gets away and he makes sure up 2 hands just in case. So you love to see that out of a young player.
No, it's good stuff. It's like you said, it's interesting where, you know, May has the big playability right now, not happening as much with Caleb, but you can't sleep on that, right? You can't use necessarily those stats or those numbers to be like, he's not going to do it to us. You always got to be careful, because we've seen it in college, we've seen it in the pros. He can make things happen. All right, let's talk about throwing the football again, specifically downfield throws. This is where they make their bread and butter. This is how explosive teams want to play football, and how you ultimately score points in this league. Drake Maye, Caleb Williams have both done it pretty solidly, college and the pros, but take us through the real numbers on it and some of the film as well.
Yeah, so ironically, these guys have actually struggled going downfield recently. Now, Drake Maye in his first few starts was one of the better downfield passes in the league, specifically on deep throws. But against the Titans, he went 0 for 5 on those types of throws and was up and down. I think he was 3 of 5 or something like that on intermediate throws, including some really rough choices like the interception that we've broken down, or a turnover-worthy play where he tries to target Kendrick Bourne down the sideline, and rather than throwing a back shoulder, he threw it inside and it almost got picked off. And then obviously the deep ball where he kind of underthrew it. Now, for Drake Maye, you're not thinking that's a long-term issue, right? You're talking about a very good Titans defense where, again, there were some bad decisions, but also those guys don't make it easy. And the throw that he overthrew, that's very rare that Drake Maye is going to mess up in those situations. Was one of the most accurate deep or downfield throwers in the league before that. But when you actually look at the numbers since week 6 on throws of 10 or more air yards, which you consider downfield, 10 to 19 is intermediate, 20 or more is deep. They've attempted about the same number. So 37 for Drake Maye, 33 for Caleb Williams. They are both bottom 10 in the NFL, or at least they're high in uncatchable throw rate. So bottom 10 in terms of ranking, but top 10 in terms of the actual number. Drake Maye's at 43.2% of his downfield passes that haven't been catchable. Caleb Williams is at 48.4%. Then you look at yards per attempt, also bottom 10 in the NFL. You got Drake Maye at 8.9, Caleb Williams 7.9. Passer rating, stop me if you've heard this one before, bottom 10 in the NFL, 68.6 for Drake Maye, 75.4 for Caleb Williams. Now, for Drake Maye, most of that, the bad has come from the turnover-worthy plays, which really kind of spiraled out of control against the Titans and kind of tanked his numbers. Yep. He has 5 turnover-worthy plays on downfield throws. I believe that's second worst in the NFL since he's become a starter. Caleb Williams, like I said, has protected the ball very well. His only turnover-worthy play was on a downfield throw. So obviously these guys have the talent. And like I said before, you don't want to sleep on Caleb Williams just because they've been inconsistent, because he's way too talented. Drake Maye, I could very much see this being a bounce back game in terms of at least not putting the ball in harm's way. Now, the Bears do a great job, especially on the back end. They don't give up a lot of explosive plays. Tyreek Stevenson has like 3 pass breakups. They're one of the top teams in the league when it comes to getting their hands on passes. Not a lot of turnovers, but they do force incompletion. So it's not going to be easy. But with Drake Maye, if he is going to push the ball downfield, he needs to at least make sure he's not putting it in harm's way, both decision-making wise and accuracy-wise.
Glad you mentioned Tyreek Stevenson in this, talking about this game and not just the gaffe he had against Washington a couple weeks ago. It was like, yeah, that shit's going to happen. And yeah, maybe he should have been benched for a little bit like he was. But, you know, a second or third round pick from 2 years ago, still a really good player. Someone you have to worry about, even though he did mess up. He apologized for his mistake and all that crap. But
I felt so bad, man. People were dogging him. I'm like, that was stupid. Like, that was really stupid. But you're a young player. I think Bears fans, once he apologized, I feel like they took it pretty well. So
I mean, they're struggling in their secondary in the back end as well. Brisker's hurt, Jalen Johnson goes on IR, so they're gonna need this guy anyway. So yeah, hopefully they realize that Stevenson's a pretty good player and it's gonna bounce back. So all right, well, that's our breakdown on Maye versus Caleb Williams, number 1 versus number 3. That's the really Bears heavy stuff we're gonna get to for this episode. We have a ton of mailbag questions that we took on Twitter, so we want to get to as many of those as possible. We're going to answer your questions. If you guys have any more, we're going to try and do rapid fire. We only have about little under a half hour because the Pats Beat guys are coming on right after us. So we'll get into a bunch of those. But before we do, let's talk about our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. They make daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So run your game all season long on PrizePicks. They have flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. So you're able to double your money even if your picks don't hit. They also now offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals this sports season. They put their members first. They're fast, easy, and secure withdrawals. When your picks hit, you get your money in as little as 15 minutes. We have a Thursday night football PrizePicks lineup coming out on my Twitter, so make sure you check that out later on tonight. It's Bengals versus Ravens on Thursday night football. 2 wide receivers in my lineup, so check it out. You know what? I'll just give it to you here. You can check out my tweet, but as long as you promise, you don't have to promise, but hop in on PrizePicks with us. I'm going with Zay Flowers to have more than 61.5 receiving yards tonight against the Bengals. Flowers has had over 100 yards in 4 out of his last 5 games. And I'm going with Jamar Chase to have less than 10 receiving targets. I know they're without T. Higgins, but they just got Trey White in there in the Baltimore back end. They obviously have a bunch of other solid players there as well. So I think Joe Burrow is going to struggle to get the ball to Chase tonight. If you like it, if you don't, come download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS, and you'll get $50 instantly on PrizePicks after you play that first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Taylor, let's get to the mailbag.
Get it.
Well, I'm going to go to the chat first. Old Man Mob. I think we have Old Man Mob like in our tweets as well, so we'll get to him. What is the Patriot clock wood flag thing that's behind me? This is that is my cousin's actually now husband who just got married. Makes these American palette design. I'll plug him right now. He makes them. So he made me that a couple years ago. It's not a clock. It's just a palette with some paint and Patriots logo. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So Old Man Mob, I'll hit you up. I'll hook you up with American palette design. We'll go from there. All right, let's go into the real questions now. First and foremost, Taylor, who's to blame for the Patriots' lack of a running game? And what has made this defense look so soft? So those are kind of the 2 things outside of the kicking game that Mayo's mentioned. You got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to stop the run. Pats haven't been able to do either. Who and what is to blame?
Yeah, so you could definitely say that, like, oh, Van Pelt isn't giving quite enough window dressing, right? Like, he doesn't use a ton of motion in his run game. With you look at a lot of these Shanahan West Coast offenses, they'll have the tight ends moving in different ways. It gives them some advantageous angles or gives them a little bit of momentum in their blocks. Sometimes, you'll have receivers motion a certain way to create stress on the defense. That's not really in his wheelhouse. I don't think the Patriots hired him thinking he was going to be that. And I think it's kind of unfair for us to put that on him because there's a lot of coaches in the NFL that don't really subscribe to that type of motion. Now, that being said, at the end of the day, like Gerard Mayo says, at some point you need to run the ball when they know you're going to run. The Patriots can't run the ball when teams have no idea that they're going to run because they're so bad at it, they don't really care that they're going to run. The biggest thing has been execution. Now, on the left side of the line was where I saw most of the issues last week, where Vidarian Lowe acknowledged he did not have his best game. The offensive line did not have their best games. He had a miscommunication where he didn't hear a can call where they switched runs. Yep. There were some times where he and Michael Jordan's double teams weren't very good, and you saw some penetration there. Or even some times where they would get to the second level and miss that guy. And then even on the right side, like Mike and Wenu mentioned today, that he is kind of disappointed in how he's played this season. And I understand why. He's been pretty inconsistent. And even on the right side with him and DeMontre Jacobs, like there have been some flashes, but those guys haven't been doing enough either. Ben Jones has been solid, but I mean, you kind of expect it's not going to be great from him, really. He's a replacement level player, and that's really what you're getting. Although, obviously, his effort has been very good. Now, with the Patriots putting Mike Nwenu at left guard, we talked to him about that today. I asked him specifically, is it because of the ground game? Are you trying to get more going? He's like, I actually don't know. Ask the coaches. Tomorrow, I'll try to ask Scott Peters, get a little more information on that. But putting Layden Robinson in the lineup last week, knowing you were facing Jeffrey Simmons, my thought was this is because they want to get the run game going. Now, Layden Robinson is back in the lineup, which that in its own, I'm not upset with because the Bears don't have a great interior, especially without Andrew Billings. So he's not going to have to face a Jeffrey Simmons, and maybe this is a good week to get his confidence back. Yeah. Don't love the idea of putting Mike Nwenu at left. One, because he hasn't played there in so long. We have no idea how comfortable he's going to be. I asked him, is it like wiping with the other hand? Like, is it kind of weird? And, everybody laughed. I thought that was kind of a common thing. And I was like, I guess not. Maybe I sounded kind of crazy. But he did mention that, it's really more of a mental challenge than a physical challenge because everything's inverted. And then on the right side, you're putting Layden Robinson next to another young, inexperienced player in DeMontre Jacobs, and they've never worked together. Because the right side has been Mike Nwenu at one of two spots. It's never been two completely different people. So this is a huge shakeup of the offensive line that, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. If the run game is better because you have your two bigger, more physical guys in there, awesome. But chemistry matters. And one who downplayed it when I mentioned the effect of chemistry and said, really it just comes down to doing it. But I don't know, man. It's going to be hard because you don't know how this other guy works necessarily. And one who did mention he and Vidarian Lowe have worked together before back last season when Vidarian Lowe
on the right side, though, right? Yeah,
exactly. But Vidarian wasn't very good there, and I think he would probably say that if you asked him. The numbers tell you the story. I think he told me last year that he was much more comfortable on the left side. And it's also different because for them everything is flipped. So we'll see how it works. But at the end of the day, it's execution. That's what's made them soft. They're not executing well enough. That's been 2.5 weeks in a row. Something's got to give because they cannot survive with Drake May dropping back and being the only way that they can get yards on the ground or produce on offense, period.
Yeah, I don't love all the shuffling. And I get Michael Jordan has him great and they want to try and, get him out of the starting lineup. And they trust Layden Robinson clearly enough to try and throw him out there yet another time at right guard. But I like that you mentioned the lack of experience with both him and Jacobs on the right side. You have Lowe, who's played pretty well at left tackle, at least in pass pro, and Onwenu, who is relatively reliable, probably your best player right now on the offensive line. But switching him to a place that he hasn't played in, 3 seasons now, I don't love it. We'll see how it goes. But I want to go.
One other thing. I was talking to Brian about this after practice. There are 2 players on the Patriots offensive line who have 17 games of starting experience. And only one who has a full entire season of starting experience. And one who's the only one with a full season of starting experience. The only one with, I believe it's now 17 games, is Vidarian Lowe. And they're also the only ones, I believe, that either have been starters at any point before this season or aren't rookies or like guys that never played before. Because Vidarian and Mike Nwenu, who, surprise, surprise, have been your best offensive linemen. And then DeMontre Jacobs, Layden Robinson, and Ben Brown. So when people ask, why isn't the offensive line playing that well?
Inexperience.
Sometimes it's just as simple as the personnel, where the guy, and again, Mike and Wendell's not playing up the standard, but I don't think it's a coincidence that their two best guys and their three best guys all season have all been people who have started multiple games and also are. Arian's only 25, but on the older side and at least have some experience.
All right, I want to parlay the O-line talk into Cole Strange, who, according to Mark Daniels, is on track to play again this season. So if he comes back, Ben Brown struggling on the inside, but there's been flip-flop, left guard, right guard. Michael Jordan played well early, has been playing well of late. What do you think is the best spot for Cole Strange to play if and when he does end up being healthy this season?
It's tough because I have a different stance on this offensive line every week because they move people around every week. If the lineup they have right now works out and they are saying we need to put Cole in the lineup, also just because they love Layden Robinson clearly and want to keep him on the field. I also think DeMontre Jacobs every week is earning more and more respect because he's been solid, man. Like, it's really hard to critique him given where he came from in terms of the fact that he was added on the first week of the season, missed training camp, and is learning all this kind of on the fly and is going up against some elite players almost every week. I think they would want to replace Ben Brown. As solid as he's been, he doesn't really feel like a net positive. He's holding it down for sure and has been solid. But Cole Strange, I think, on the field is a net positive. He's going to have his struggles, but he's still a good player. Now, I don't know when exactly he'll play. Even if he gets activated, the guy hasn't played since last December or January, I believe. So that's a lot of time to have missed. I don't think he's going to come back and, be the old version of himself. It's going to take a while. But I would probably lean. I was thinking left guard maybe, when I was thinking that Layden Robinson might not play for the rest of the season, and I knew that Michael Jordan was going to have the lineup because he's had two really rough weeks. But yeah, for me, the most sense would probably be putting him in left guard and replacing Ben Brown.
At center, you mean, and replacing Ben Brown?
Yes, it's center.
Okay, because I'm of the opposite mindset. I think down the line, center would make the most sense. Just, David Andrews, you don't know how long he's going to be here. Cole Strange, if he can kind of rejuvenate his career and become a center, but like right now, putting him in, you don't know how much he's actually snapped the football and gotten, reps with the quarterbacks and things like that. And yes, it does seem like they like Layden Robinson, but ideally, you still want to flip Mike back to that right side. Then you can put Cole Strange there. Ben Brown has been up and down. I know it's not great. It's just something.
Brown, up and down.
I know. Seriously, it rhymes. But again, my thing is like, all right, a guy hasn't played since last November. Put him at a spot where he's at least relatively comfortable. You don't have to worry about snapping and also getting back into game shape and things like that. But it's too early to tell, I think, too. It's going to really depend on where this offensive line is when Cole Strange is actually ready to play.
Also, Chris Price spoke to Cole today. Go in his article. I'm not going to, read the whole thing, but there was a quote where Cole said, "I feel like we're kind of in the final stretch of the rehab process.
Ooh.
I want to be out there more than anyone else wants me out there. I don't know when it's going to be, but it will be soon. We're reaching that day soon."
Interesting. All right, we'll see what happens. All right, let's flip to the other side of the ball for the Pats going up against this Chicago team. What do you expect with the pass rush? Seems like a good chance for them to get right. Compared to any of the other games left. They're going to be likely without Darnell Wright, and their offensive line has struggled all season long anyway. You no longer have Josh Uche out there, but Keon White has been productive pass rushing. I know you were tweeting a lot about that. You had a couple stats out there. You talked to DeMarcus Covington about it today. Even though he's not putting up the sack numbers, he's been productive. So is this what do you expect, rather, from the pass rush this weekend?
I actually think they had a pretty good get-right game last week. It was one of their most productive days rushing the passer. Anthony Jennings, obviously, is now an every-down player for them. He looked really good when he was slanting inside or looping on line games. Keon White was on the assisting end a couple of times, looping around when Anthony Jennings was inside. Dietrich Wise, obviously, not the quickest winner, but one of your better pass rushers, especially technically. But I asked DeMarcus Covington about the line games, and he said that's always been a part of our defense. And I just think over time they've gotten better and better at that. And he also was asked about Keon White and the fact that he hasn't gotten a lot of sacks recently. And Covington was like, "Yeah, I wish he could get a sack every game." But he said what he looks at is how often Keon White's affecting the passer, how often any of his defenders are affecting the passer when they're rushing. And he said that Keon White does that on a consistent basis. And the numbers show that as well. He has more hurries than he does hits and sacks, but you do still see that quarterbacks are getting the ball out and then they're getting hit. So Keon White is making his presence felt. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to figure out where to transition here. I thought we had another pass rush question, but we didn't. But I agree. I'd like to see Keon, get into the mix and continue to produce and keep himself going on the right
Also,
track.
Jelani Tavai was pretty effective as a blitzer last week. Obviously, Christian Ellis, when he's one-on-one with backs, has been good in that role. So a little probably pass rush from there as well.
Awesome. All right, wide receiver. None are traded at the deadline. KJ Osborne, Tyquan Thornton, the ones people talked about. Kendrick Bourne, even in some rumors as well. But now the question is how the rotation is going to work. And I'll go quickly on this one. I don't think the rotation is going to change. I think Tyquan and KJ are still going to be your healthy scratches. Maybe KJ gets released. Who knows at this point? It's been a couple days now. You wonder what he's thinking, if he even wants to go through that process or if he just wants to remain. But I think right now it's Tyquan and KJ on the bench. Javon Baker continues to get some reps. We'll see what happens with Jalen Polk. He's really not earning them right now, but he's a player that maybe you want him to just stay out there and work through it on the field. But we'll see what happens. But I don't really expect to see many big changes from wide receiver.
I don't either. I just think if there's a change, we see more Javon Baker. Alex Van Pelt mentioned that he's probably going to see more snaps this week after getting open a couple times last week. And every time Alex Van Pelt talks about Javon Baker, he sounds like a guy you want on the field. It's like he's got wiggle. He's elusive. He's good in his routes. He's aggressive off the line. It's like, yes, yes, yes. Now I want to see it.
Now let's see it.
Exactly. Now I think if Javon Baker has a good game, we could maybe that's when they release KJ Osborne. I think they probably want to keep, one veteran around just in case they really can't get anything out of these young guys or, God forbid something happens. But that's really the only significant shakeup that I see. I think KJ Osborne and Tyquan Thornton, once again, will be healthy scratches.
All right, on this topic then, quick one before we go to our game time break. Are these guys getting open on film? I know you've talked about Javon Baker a little bit here. He only had, I think, 2 routes ran. He got open on both of them. But, that and the other guys, what are you seeing from this wide receiver room?
I see Kayshon Boutte get open pretty consistently. Sometimes against more physical coverage or guys that are grabbier, he can get kind of stuck. But he's competitive. Demario Douglas is Demario Douglas. Enough said. Kendrick Bourne's been inconsistent. He falls a lot for some reason. I've seen it like 2 or 3 games where I'm just like, dude, why are you on the ground? Also, the route depth with him hasn't been great, and he acknowledged that, where there were 2 plays I noticed where he was short of the sticks on 3rd downs, and he said, yes, I'm getting my feet under me. I need to make sure I push past so I have space to come back to the ball and still get the first down. So Kendrick Bourne's been inconsistent. He was good on those like curls. He was getting open, just wasn't, getting the proper depth. Hunter Henry, always open. Austin Hooper, for his skill set, has been pretty solid in that regard too. So I think guys are getting open. The bigger issue I would think is like in zones when they need to make sure their spacing is good. And a lot of that has to do with the guys' inexperience and sometimes getting thrown off their routes. Like there was one route where Kayshon Boutte's running a go, essentially a clear out for an out route from Demario Douglas in the slot. And Bourne got kind of bullied off the line of scrimmage. And it took him so long to get into his route that he and Pop ended up basically on the same plane as Demario was coming out of the route, and that essentially covered his up. So, really against zone, I feel like more than man is where I see them struggle to create the kind of separation you want to see consistently. But I think that's just also part of the growing pains. But against man, they do a pretty good job getting open.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the spacing too. There's been a lot of that. I mean, it happened a few times in, I think it was Maye's first game against Houston, I want to say, where they were no, maybe it was Jacksonville, where Jalen Polk, Hunter Henry in the same area. I think something similar happened this past week as well. I know that doesn't necessarily have to do with getting open, more has to do with scheme stuff, but and we'll talk about the scheme a little bit in a little while. But glad you mentioned that, because that's been an issue for them as well. All right, we're going to continue with the mailbag. We'll get to some questions in the comments as well. We have just under 15 minutes left here to wrap things up, but let's talk about game time. First and foremost, if you're headed to Chicago to watch the Patriots versus the Bears, you can get into Soldier Field for as little as $179 on the Game Time app right now. Sounds like a lot, but it's not too bad for an NFL game at a historic site out in Chicago. So if you're going to be out there, check it out and use our code CLNS to get $20 off that purchase. Game Time is the best place to get your tickets. They have the Game Time Picks feature. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. They have super deals, amazing deals, and great deals right on the app. It filters by each of them to give you the great deals they have on all of your tickets. So make sure you download Game Time today. You can customize your spot as well. You can see your seat view right on the app, so you can see exactly what you're going to see on the field, in the concert hall, or wherever you're buying tickets through the Game Time app. So make sure to use it and go take the guesswork out of buying tickets today with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Taylor?
Game time.
Let's go. It's game time. It's also time to wrap up this mailbag with a couple final questions here. So we got this one, and I don't mean it sincerely to ask it. And the question is, who should replace Jerod Mayo next season? I don't think, and you don't think, that they're going to fire him after 1 year. I want to turn this into a different question because I've seen a lot of Ben Johnson rumors out there from Detroit where he wants the perfect spot. Adam Schefter reported today he doesn't want to go to Chicago because there's issues there with ownership and things of that nature. But the rumor was that Johnson wanted to go to Chicago last year to work with a younger quarterback. The reason I'm saying this and adding layers to this, Taylor, is I'm curious to you. If the Patriots could land Ben Johnson as their head football coach next year, would you take him over Jerod Mayo?
I don't like the idea of firing a coach.
I know.
With this roster.
I agree with that.
So much inexperience. I think it would be a really bad move and a bad look for the Kraft family. I think it would seem very rash. And I think most people and like rational followers of football would be like, that you screwed that guy. Mm-hmm. So no, I think there's another wonderkind who comes down the line, in 2 years, then maybe for sure.
Okay.
And obviously you want someone who can, maximize Drake and maximize the offense, and especially someone like a Shanahan who could stick around for a long time because he's the head coach. But at the same time, I think that there's so much buy-in from the players, even through all of the struggles they've had this season in what Jerod Mayo was trying to build. And they understand this was not going to be a year where they probably made the playoffs. I thought at least that if they were healthy, they did have a chance, right? Because the defense was supposed to be like top 10. And then the run game, you're thinking if City So's at left guard and he takes a step forward, you figure out the right side, and then you should be able to have a good ground game. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition. But yeah, I think it's a bad move. I selfishly would love Ben Johnson just because of what happened. But also, you have to think about reputation and all those things and what message you're sending to the league. And I think it would just look very reactionary if they let go of Mayo this quickly.
I think that's the right way to look at it, where I would rather Ben Johnson to be the head football coach of the Patriots. And I think if they knew he'd come, that probably would be the right decision for the long term. But there are layers to it, like you said, that you tell the team, you tell this guy, look, we want you for the foreseeable future. We want to allow you and Elliott to lay the groundwork and turn this team around. And everybody knew before the year that it wasn't going to be a 1 year turnaround. So it's not like they're necessarily not meeting expectations, because there weren't really that high of expectations, I don't think, through ownership and things like that. But man, he runs a hell of an offense for those Detroit Lions. And it's one of those things philosophically for me. I think in this day and age, I would rather a head football coach on the offensive side of the ball, because quarterback and offense, it's that kind of league. It's most important. Your offensive coordinator, if he does well under a defensive head coach, is going to go and take a head coaching job, just like Ben Johnson, where Detroit's going to lose Ben Johnson. But you don't lose him if he's the offensive head coach, like a Sean McVay, like an Andy Reid. So it's a tough fence to kind of lean on right now, but it's obviously a hypothetical. But figured it's worth talking and kind of hitting with this comment in there.
And also, I saw somebody mention that like he wouldn't. I know Old Man Mom said he wouldn't come here. I don't think that's true. They have money. They have draft capital. They have plenty. Like they have Drake May, Christian Barmore, Christian Gonzalez, like Mike Nwenu. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of like legit Keon White. Like they have very good core pieces. Obviously, you need to build around that. But if for in whatever reason, Ben Johnson was asked, would you like to be that coach of the Patriots? I think this is one of the hottest destinations, because you've got your quarterback, 2 premium positions filled, and plenty of capital over at least this year, but probably over the next few years to fill everything out.
I think the quarterback's massive. You're totally right. Yeah. And I think that's a reason why he would come here. And the rumors have been for the last couple of years, he's being super selective. He doesn't just want to go to the highest bidder or a team that just, not a random team, but he doesn't want to just jump too fast because he likes what he's doing in Detroit. I think the Patriots, maybe an open-ish checkbook for him to come here, and obviously a quarterback who would seemingly be, at the very least, fun to work with in Drake May. So I agree. I think he would at least think about it, but it's a hypothetical that we don't know about. All right, I want to go to the chat with the super chat. Thank you, D, for the cash. We appreciate you. And it has to do with what we were talking about before, and it's the wide receivers and the route sequencing and spacing. So why do you think it's been so bad?
So what I typically notice is the young guys will sometimes get thrown, like bumped in zone coverage which sometimes that'll just slow you down so much and that's the big part of it. That's why, like, especially like defensive coaches will get so angry if they watch a team play zone and not reroute anybody, because then you're literally just playing on air. And against good quarterbacks like the Patriots, every single time, really they do it all the time, but especially when they play Mahomes and Kelsey's life is a living hell. Mm-hmm. They do everything they can to make sure that he isn't just able to run his routes. They want to throw off that timing. And when you're running routes downfield, it's even more important, because if you're the clear out route and someone kind of knocks you off and it takes you just like half a second to gather yourself, that hurts the person who's running underneath you, because it allows the zone defender to be able to midpoint a little bit more. Also, I just think for young receivers, it's hard to know where exactly you are on the field consistently. So I'd say those are probably the biggest factors that I've noticed.
Yeah. There was another film question here that I want to hit on as well. And I guess I don't have it, but I agree with everything you said on the wide receiver spacing. It has to improve. And thank you, D, for the super chat. All right, let's go back to Elliott Wolf and this draft class, because right now it looks like they've kind of only hit on Drake Maye, and it's super early. They've only played 9 games. But Jalen Polk, not looking good. Javon Baker, not seeing the field. We were having the debate, was it last night on Pat's Daily, or on the crossover rather, who has been the most promising and best rookie outside of Drake Maye? And it might be Marcellus Dial right now. And so is the draft class already a bust? And yeah, what do you think of the class as a whole right now?
You can't even judge a rookie class on their first season, much less, the first half of their entire career, or the first season rather of their careers. Now, obviously, like Caden Wallace got hurt. Layden Robinson was thrown into the fire against some very good competition. Obviously, didn't look great, but they clearly see something in him that they like. Javon Baker's on the rise. At least it seems that way on the outside. Jalen Polk, yes, is struggling. And then, like, Joe Milton wasn't going to play anyway. Jaheim Bell is someone they say is on the rise. Now, they need to show it on the field. I don't really care what they're doing in practice, because it needs to translate. But yeah, this is way, way too early to be casting any judgment on these guys. It's one thing if like a guy's so bad you cut him, or like if it's in a mere speed where, and that wasn't the same situation. They were trying to create room. But yeah, unless you end up cutting a guy because he's so bad, which rarely happens unless you do something off the field. Yeah, this is a big fat incomplete. Even for Drake Maye, we don't know what he is yet. Because like last week was one of the worst games of his career so far in terms of turning the ball over. And now it's like, okay, can you bounce back next week to where we say, oh, that was a blip on the radar? Or does it snowball? And then we say, we may have to be worried about Drake. So yeah, it's way too soon to tell.
Way too soon. I do agree though with the talk about Javon Baker and the talk about Jaheim Bell. It's like, look, I understand that they're, their storylines, and you want to, I guess tell us and understand that, no, these guys are, they're going to be impactful, but I don't really care until it happens. So yeah, Jaheim Bell looks like he could be a potentially solid player, a third tight end here. And Javon Baker, they're talking about him. We got to let it happen, or we have to see it happen rather. But you're 100% right on, we can't grade these guys out yet, because quarterbacks have had great starts and ended up being busts, and vice versa, where the example that I think of over the last couple of years, who a wide receiver specifically who did not start hot at all and has turned into one of the better players in the entire league, is Nico Collins in Houston, who had a really rough start to his tenure in Houston. And I don't know if he was necessarily making mental gaffes or mistakes on the field like Jalen Polk has, because I didn't watch every single down from Texans games, but he wasn't productive. He was someone who was sort of an afterthought as a second or third round pick, I believe, of the Texans. Now all of a sudden, yeah, he's on IR right now, but he's CJ Stroud's number 1 guy and has become one of the best players in football. So let's be patient with this draft class and see what happens.
And also the front office and also the coaching staff to a degree. Like,
patience.
Got a lot of youth on this team and inexperience. So, you got to give them some air to breathe.
Definitely. All right. Let's talk about the Duggar rumors. Do you think there was anything to that? I don't. I think the way I read everything was teams called on Duggar and the Patriots said no. I think it would be a bad look if they signed this guy to not only the transition tag, but then the extension was like, you know what? We actually don't want you to be here. So I thought it was BS, but your thoughts on that? And I want to tie in the Duggar injury as well, because he didn't practice again today. Not a good outlook for him, at least against Chicago. So what would not having Duggar do to the Patriots against Chicago?
Unless they were getting a second-round pick, I did not think there was any chance they were going to trade him. I think they were on the same page where people probably called and they were like, no. That's it. That's really all I think about that, plain and simple. The injury, it stinks because One thing that we mentioned on the show is that the Patriots have been getting killed by toss plays and outside zone to the perimeter. And DeMarcus Covington, actually, who else I asked? Christian Gonzalez. I asked him about it yesterday, and he said, yeah, we get paid to cover, but you also have to help out the front and do your jobs and, be tough to make those tackles. And today, DeMarcus Covington was asked about the run game struggles, and he said, yeah, perimeter force, you got to set the edges, not let the ball get outside. I was like, yes,
yeah,
he said it. But yeah, that's Duggar, and a lot of that was because in a lot of the packages that we've seen, they've struggled against shotgun runs specifically to the outside. And what they'll do against teams that run a lot of RPOs, like we've seen the past couple of weeks with the Jets and the Titans, is when they get to the receiver side where they think the RPO is going to be coming from, instead of having a slot receiver there, they'll have the safeties and the slot receiver switch roles. So the cornerback has more range. They're going to play the back end in some kind of split safety look. And then you have the safety in the slot to be able to handle the RPOs or be the force in the run game. Usually that's Peppers or it's Duggar. Now it's been Marte Mapu and Del Pettis. Now those guys, I love their effort. They're intense guys, but at the same time, Del Pettis is like 5'11", 200 pounds. Not small, but not big either. And then Marte Mapu is not the biggest guy either. You can see it in his frame. He should not be taking on a lot of blocks or working the run game, which is why I like him better in a Devin McCourty role where he's a free safety and he's in man coverage and a robber, not really in the mix with the run game. But one, the recognition hasn't always been great. Like Del Pettis was like seconds late on a couple of explosive runs allowed. Then Marte Mapu has been involved in a few of these outside plays, just not super physical. A lot of the times he'll try to go over or under blocks. And sometimes you kind of screw yourself by doing that, and take yourself out of the play rather than just engaging. So at least you have the ability to go inside or out as needed. So yeah, with the injury, it stinks because one, you lose a playmaker. I think on the back end in terms of coverage, they've been fine. Marte Mapu has gotten burned a few times where they have misdirection and he's like 2 seconds late to figure out what's going on and then has to kind of recover. But in the run game is where his him being absent has really been felt. So not going to play probably this week. He's missed 2 straight practices, again with the ankle injury, but hopefully he can come back next week.
Yeah, losing a captain too. It is a curse to be a Patriots captain this season.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that angle. Jeez,
continues to say. All right, we only have a few minutes left here, Taylor, so let's take one more, and we'll focus in on the Bears because that's who they play on Sunday. Has there anyone in film study, in game prep, that has made you go, sir, I owe you an apology. I was not familiar with your game?
Not exactly that, but I will take this opportunity to plug my boy Austin Booker. I loved him coming out of Kansas. Is it Kansas or Kansas State? What's the one with the J? Kansas, yeah. Really long dude, a lot of tools. The funny thing is, he was known as a pass rusher coming out of college because like you look at his highlight reel, even like his pressures and sacks. What's the one I said? His sacks come off of like a ton of different moves, and that was what got me really excited. I thought, hey, draft him as a situational pass rusher in like the 4th round or wherever. I think he got taken in the 3rd. Yeah, draft him there, let him be that, and then get bigger and be a better run stopper. He's actually been a better run stopper. Like he's got that length and he's used it really well, anchored down, and he's been a force against the run, setting the edge. But as a pass rusher, he's done very, very little and looks extremely raw, which is really surprising. I didn't expect that. So he's definitely maybe someone who stood out to me when I was watching. And then Darnell Taylor is actually a really solid player. He's been really, when Montez Sweat was out, he was the guy who was getting most of their pressures. So I'll kind of highlight those 2 edge guys for the Bears.
Love it. All right, well, we got to get out of here. We only have 2 minutes before the Pats beat guys come on. Alex and Brian coming up with their Patriots versus Bears preview. So if you're here, make sure you stick around on the channel. Hang out with those guys for the next hour as they preview the game as well. Myself and Taylor will be back on Sunday for some Patriots versus Bears coverage. We'll also have you covered on the channel all weekend long leading up to it. So follow, rate, review, subscribe to Patriots Press Pass. Follow at TKyles39 on Twitter. Follow myself at Mike Kadlick as well for the best Patriots coverage in all of the land. Taylor, I'm talking us up. I gotta get us off on a good note before we wrap it up for the weekend. So thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it as always. Thank you for the questions. Sorry we weren't able to get to all of them on a bit of a time crunch here, but thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other, and we will talk to you next time. Peace out, everyone.